The NHL regular season arrives today. Oh wait, but the Canadiens still have one more preseason game to get through. Hey there, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of Habs Hockey Report right here on the All Habs Hockey Magazine YouTube channel, part of Rocket Sports Media. We're so glad that you're here with us today. My name is Amy Johnson. I'm your host of the show each and every Thursday. I know this one's coming out on a Friday. We switched it up a little bit this week. You can also find me as the lead correspondent at our Laval Rocket centric site over at ahlreport.com. But our flagship website at Rocket Sports Media, of course, is All Habs Hockey Magazine. You can find that at allhabs.net. I recommend you take a look if you haven't visited recently. We've got some new writers who have been churning out some really great content. Every day that there's a game day, we'll have a game day preview in the afternoon, followed by a comprehensive game recap at night. Lots of news articles. It's the place to go for all of your Montreal Canadiens news. Right now, just hit that subscribe button. Also tap that notification bell. You don't ever want to miss an episode. And hey, if you could do me a favor, the best way you could help us out here at Habs Hockey Report is just hitting that share button and sharing this program on your favorite social media platform. Sed Lang says, great job on the opening video montage. Sed, thank you so much. Those are all shot by our editor-in-chief, Rick Stevens, and because I'm the one doing the interviewing in all of those. A lot of them are one-on-one interviews that we did with all of those coaches and players and prospects that you saw, some of whom are not even with the organization anymore, but we're glad that you liked the production value on that opening video montage, and we're glad that you discovered the channel. We've got plenty to talk about today. The Montreal Canadiens marching forward through the lengthy preseason that they're going through. 8 preseason games is a lot, particularly when you're playing Ottawa what feels like a million times. We're going to talk about all of that today, how the week has gone for the Habs in preseason, as well as some other Montreal Canadiens related news. We can give you a peek at what's going on in the Laval Rockets training camp, and also take a look in our third segment at some of your responses to last week's feedback forum question. We'll read those, react to those. And hey, we've got a new feedback forum question for you. If you're new here, this is a weekly opportunity where I pose a question to you, the viewer, and you are invited to then leave your answer down in the comments section below. And on next week's show, there's a good chance that we'll read your response right here on the show, talk about it, react to it. This week's feedback forum question is, has your season outlook changed at all since training camp started? Did you have some sort of own personal expectation for how the Habs were going to perform this season, or how they would look? Has that opinion or expectation changed at all having watched 2 weeks of training camp? Leave that comment down in the comment section below, and let's just get started talking about those Habs. Canadiens have played Ottawa and Ottawa and Ottawa and Ottawa. Oh, they had a game against Toronto in there. What can we say about all of that? They haven't won a game yet. Last week's show was pause the panic on the preseason. So no one's jumping off a cliff because the Canadiens haven't won a game yet in their preseason. Marty St. Louis was quoted a couple times this week talking about how the team needs to really start to get into sync, and that the cohesiveness wasn't forming yet for lines and so forth. Have you seen the lines for each game? Because they never look the same. I'm not quite sure how the coach expects the team to get into a sync, get into rhythm, and find cohesiveness and chemistry on lines when literally every game, the lines are shuffling around every time. And sure, that happens plenty in preseason. usually more towards the beginning of preseason. But towards the end of preseason, particularly as lengthy of a preseason as Montreal has, many, if not most NHL teams have played their final preseason games already, which means their rosters are pretty much set. That hasn't been the case for Montreal yet. I understand the coach is trying to feel out the young guys and see where he can find some chemistry, give guys late looks and that kind of thing, but there has not been a single ounce of consistency yet in any of the line combinations for Marty St. Louis' team. And maybe that has a big chunk of issues to do with why they're not in sync and why they're not finding any cohesiveness. There's been some players who have had some individually notable games throughout this past week. This season, I expect, will be some entertaining hockey, some fun goals. We're hoping to see Cole Caulfield break it wide open this year. Habs hockey will be entertaining to watch this year, but that we don't expect there to be a lot of wins at the end of the day. And that's really basically what preseason has ended up being. Some of it has been entertaining hockey, and they just can't get it done. Goaltending is going to be an issue this year. Caden Primo needs more time in the AHL. I'm very concerned by the fact that despite coming off of a really hot run in the postseason for Laval last year, Caden Primo is still has not been able to carry that into this season, and once again, when exposed at the NHL level, is coming up short and looking a little underwhelming. So I expect Caden Primo to be going to Laval sooner rather than later. Ottawa's basically icing their opening night roster at this point, and Pierre Dorian did a lot of good work over the summer, and Ottawa's looking pretty feisty, and Ottawa's looking pretty talented up front. Giroux is a big addition for them. DeBrincat's a big addition for them. Stützle's doing Tim Stützle kind of things. So it'll be a tough task for the Canadiens to try to get a victory in their final preseason game. Nick Suzuki finally got in for a game, and he didn't even travel with the team. He's got an upper body injury day to day, but Marty St. Louis doesn't predict him missing out on opening night. Emil Heineman and Yoel Armia, however, different story. They are not listed as day-to-day right now, and it's unfortunate for Heineman. Heineman really had some good momentum. Would really like to see how he's going to start the season. Hope his injury isn't out for too long. And Armia, that's yet another loss up front for Marty St. Louis with a veteran player. So it's going to be interesting to see who the opening night roster is next week. There are still cuts that need to be made, and of course teams have until, I believe, 5 p.m. on Monday to submit their final season starting roster. So expect to see some more cuts probably on Sunday after the team returns from this Kraft Hockeyville road trip. Logan Mailloux signed to his 3-year ELC, and interesting that they dropped that news on Wednesday, which was basically the only day this past week that the Canadiens did not have a media availability because that was their travel day to Newfoundland. That's not a coincidence. That can't be a coincidence. So because they knew that this was going to be a polarizing announcement that Logan Mailloux was getting his ELC. Here's where I stand on that from day one. When Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton came on board, that the biggest thing that I wanted to see them do, in addition to focusing on development, was that they were going to make hockey decisions, and good hockey decisions, because that is what their business is. Their business is hockey. And Logan Mailloux did a terrible thing. I don't condone what Logan Mailloux did in any way, shape, or form. It was an awful thing. He was charged and convicted for what he did, was given a sentence for it, and served it. And then came back to North America and got drafted by the Canadiens, and he has done a lot more mandated rehab, recovery, those types of things. All that being said, Logan Mailloux has the potential, and is at his age already quite a good hockey player. I commend the fact that Kent Hughes made a good hockey decision, signed him to his ELC. because basically he's saying to Logan Mailloux, okay, we charged you with the task of continuing your work, continuing your counseling, continuing community service and payback and helping in those kinds of ways, and showing us both on and off the ice that you're improving your entire person. And you know what? We have seen that you've made progress in doing that. And we've also seen your skills as a hockey player. And so we're going to show that if you're going to make the investment in yourself in the ways that we've asked you to, then we are going and in your community the way that we've asked you to, then we will make the investment in you back and we'll sign you to this contract. Logan Mailloux is going to go back to junior. He's going to go play, and we'll see how he develops again this year. The other thing that came out this week that I give the Canadiens credit for thinking outside the box for game production and entertainment for fans at the Bell Centre. Did you see the news this week that the Canadiens and the Bell Centre will have the league's first installation of an escape room on site starting this season? I like that it's Canadiens themed and it's got kind of a vintage feel to it. So I like the way the room itself actually looks. And if you're not familiar with an escape room, it's where it's an interactive game that people go and play. You know, some people go bowling like the guys did in Gander. Some people go to the movies. Some people go play miniature golf. Some people go to an escape room. It's a very popular new thing where you basically get locked into a room that is a puzzle for you to figure out how to get out. There's a series of clues around the room that will lead you to another clue, to another clue, to another clue. And if you can figure all of those out, then you will eventually find the key to get you out of the room. And you typically have about 30 minutes to do so. And you get scored or graded on how fast you can find your way out. So 4 people will get locked into the Canadiens escape room prior to puck drop. And they have 30 minutes to get out, to get to their seats. And there's cameras and microphones inside the room, and everyone else sitting in the Bell Center waiting for the game to start is going to get live look-ins and listen-ins to all of you in the escape room, sitting there eating their popcorn and their hot dogs and their beer, watching you on the Jumbotron. You then have to wear a t-shirt for the rest of the night as you get escorted to your seats that either says, "I escaped" or "I failed." I mean, so you have to be A-okay with being the subject of potential humiliation to do this escape room. It's not just something fun that you're going to go do with your friends. My favorite part were some of the comments when this announcement came out. Is there a way to escape from this abysmal preseason that the Canadiens are having? And there was even one, I think, that said the Canadiens' defense can't even escape their own zone, something to that effect. I mean, it was, yeah, they were getting roasted pretty hard. Laval Rockets training camp did begin on Sunday this week. They've been having scrimmages on the community rink at Place Belle all week this week as cuts were made. Of course, the AHL training camp also includes a lot of guys who will eventually play in Trois-Rivières in the ECHL. And in fact, just this week, we had the first cuts from the Laval Rocket training camp, most of whom are going straight to Trois-Rivières. Forwards Anthony Beauregard, Nicolas Gay, Cedric Maltmany, and James Phelan, as well as defensemen Alex Breton, Philippe Bureau-Blais, Santino Santarame, and Bradley Johnson, all cut from Rocket Camp and heading to the Trois-Rivières Lions, as well as a cut who is not heading to Trois-Rivières, and that is goaltender Zachary Bouthillier. JF Uhl and his crew start to get a better picture of who they will have available to them for their opening night roster. The Laval Rocket playing 2 preseason games as opposed to Montreal's 8. Laval gets 2. Both of them will be played in Belleville. That's the AHL affiliate of the Ottawa Senators in Belleville, Ontario, at the CAA Arena. Both of them are at 3 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon. On Saturday, they will play the Toronto Marlies. On Sunday at 3 o'clock, Laval gets to be the so-called home team playing against the Belleville Senators. Filip Mesar was cut from the Montreal Canadiens camp, but he was sent to Laval. And so Filip Mesar has an opportunity to potentially play in the AHL this season. Mesar had a pretty notable training camp for the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously not quite NHL ready yet, but he was one of the brighter spots of the early portion of the Habs NHL camp. Here's how the CHL-NHL agreement works. Once you assign him to the OHL or in the CHL and he begins to play there, then the CHL-NHL agreement kicks into place where CHL players cannot play in the AHL until they're 20 years old. Filip Mesar is kind of on the cusp. He was showing enough promise at the NHL level in training camp that perhaps sending him to the OHL would not be the best thing for his development, because they're not quite sure yet if, you've seen this happen sometimes where a prospect kind of on the cusp like that goes to the OHL and the OHL is not enough of a challenge for them. There's not a lot of development happening there because it's like, they weren't good enough quite for the NHL, but they're almost too good for the OHL. I'm not saying that that's the case with Filip Mesar. They have the opportunity to evaluate him at the AHL level. If they feel he can hang in the AHL, the AHL is a tough league. It's not an easy league to play in. Then they could opt to keep him there. If they feel that perhaps even that's a bit too much of a leap at this point, then they have the option to send him to London and the OHL. Filip Mesar has been very clear that he wants to play in Laval, and so he's hoping to do everything that he can to prove to the Canadiens and to the Laval Rocket staff that that's where he belongs. There was a great picture that came out this week. Filip Mesar, Jan Mysak, Matthias Norlinder, big smiles. I would bet these three are kind of like three peas in a pod. I would throw, if Jesse Ylönen gets cut from Canadiens camp, throw him into that pile as well. You can see a really great little friendship of guys and some great chemistry forming there. Lots to keep an eye on with the prospects, even if they aren't in NHL training camp any longer. And don't forget, this week's feedback forum question, answer it down below for next week's show, is: has your outlook for the Habs season changed at all now that you've watched what they've done in the preseason and the fact that they haven't won a game, or maybe some players are performing better or worse than you anticipated they would? Has your outlook and expectations for the team changed for better or for worse based off of what you've seen in preseason? Last week's question was centered around the young prospects and who you thought of all of the young prospects could make the opening night roster for the Canadiens. Ursa Major say Heineman is the only forward I'd consider giving a few games to at the season start. And he also says that Jack-Eye on the defense side would be a candidate to stay at the NHL level. Jack-Eye is certainly making his presence known. He seems to be pretty proud in a post-game press conference when he said, I think I made a few new enemies tonight. And he said that with a good amount of pride. I did enjoy Sarah Rogers' comment that said, yes, it's the preseason and wins aren't all of that important. Yes, it's the preseason. The coaching staff is doing the best to figure out which pieces fit best where. Yes, it's the preseason and it'll take time for things to fall into place, but I can't help but cringe every time I hear the names Primo and Drouin as still being part of this team. I hope they prove me wrong, but I don't see that happening. Sarah, I appreciate your candor. Drouin, I agree, could absolutely, anytime they want to have him continue his NHL career with a different franchise, I'm right on that train with you. Primo, I don't believe is the goaltender of the future for the Montreal Canadiens. I believe he's better suited in the AHL, and I think they need to start focusing more on that and finding a better NHL replacement for Jake Allen. Taz Anderson says, talks about Slafkovsky a bit. He says, one thing I didn't like to see was Slafkovsky coasting after losing the puck. Did it all night versus the Leafs. You're young and fast. Chase that puck down. The laziness was concerning. Dave says that after watching last week's preseason game, he agrees that Gouli makes the big club. And we saw Caden Gouli make that goal in the first period in Gander. I really still believe Gouli definitely makes the team. Center Heist says, great show. I enjoyed it. Gouli clearly should make the Habs on the back end, followed by Harris by some distance, then Jackeye. So there's another vote for Gouli right there, and Harris has certainly had a good camp as well. And last but not least, I do want to mention we welcome fans of any fan base here at Habs Hockey Report. Yes, this is a Montreal Canadiens based show. However, we love hockey here, and we love having great hockey conversations with fans of any team, including the Toronto Maple Leafs. And thank you, Mr. Some of It, who says, Leafs fan here, Slafkovsky will be a good forward this season. 70 to 80 points is my best guess. They've got to find 2 good line mates to play with him. Give them time to build some chemistry. Won't happen right away. Stay patient. And that was a very thoughtful, intelligent, and nice comment that was left by a Leafs fan here. So thank you for that, and we appreciate the compliment to the Montreal Canadiens' first overall pick. I cannot wait to come back next Thursday to talk about some actual real hockey and analyze who made that opening night roster. So if you missed last week's show, be sure to check that out right here. There was some good nuggets in that one you don't want to miss. And we'll see you back here next Thursday for another episode of Habs Hockey Report.